This is Jamie Drummond for Good Food Revolution. I'm here with Richmond Station's Carl Heinrich, and today we're going to be messing about with Wüsthof's Classic Ikon range. But what else are we going to be doing?
We're going to make some sauerkraut.
Sauerkraut. Now, why sauerkraut?
Well, I've been on sort of a fermentation kick lately, and you know, the best foods in the world are fermented. Talk about wine, beer, bread, salami, cheese, sauerkraut, yogurt. I mean, all these things come from fermentation, which is basically bacteria cultures or yeasts or a combination of the two doing their thing and creating acid. You know, lactic acid in this case, we're making a lactic fermented cabbage, which is sauerkraut.
Okay. Yeah. And you were telling me earlier your very first knife was a Wüsthof knife.
It was, you know, that's a fun story. I was working at this, my first professional kitchen when I was 16 years old. And, you know, I was still living at home with my folks. And I'd go into work after school. And the chef came to me one day and he's like, you know, you really need to go get a knife. And I was so excited about this. So I saved up all my money. And I went down to the mall and I went to, I think it was House of Knives. And, you know, I tried out all these knives and I stuck with this Wüsthof, like 10 or 12 inch blade, massive knife. And I was so excited about it. I get back to the restaurant, pull it out, it's super sharp. And the chef looks at me and says, what the f*** are you going to do with that thing? Sorry. Because it was such a big knife. And, you know, I still have that knife today and I use it. But the 8-inch blade is, for me, a perfect sort of beginner's knife, the knife that I should have started out with.
Got you.
This is a good knife, and it's you know, it's the only knife I'm going to use today. If you're going to have only one knife, this is the knife you're going to have. Wüsthof is a good steel. It's a strong steel. It gets sharp and it stays sharp. As far as a beginner's knife go or a young chef knife, like, this is a really good quality knife, and like I said, I still have mine. But start with the 8-inch instead of the 10-inch. So, sauerkraut. Now, sauerkraut can be made in a few different ways. The first way I learned how to make sauerkraut was from my Alsatian chef when I was working with Daniel Blud in New York City. The chef of the restaurant was this guy named Olivier. Now, Olivier loved his choucroute garni, and he taught me how to make sauerkraut. And when we made it there, we would take the cabbage, slice it up, and then weigh it, and then add a percentage of salt to the weight of the cabbage, and then layer it in an urn, and then leave it for 3 weeks, and then you'd have fermented cabbage.
Right.
The way that I make sauerkraut now is a little different, where instead of using the liquid that comes out of the cabbage, I use a brine. Now, the difference is that the brine will actually ferment the cabbage a little bit faster, and it's a little bit easier because the enemy in fermentation is air, right? Is oxygen, because oxygen will give bacteria a place to breathe. If there's no oxygen and no air, you're going to have a much easier time controlling the bacteria in there. So what I'm doing here is I'm just peeling away the outside leaves of the cabbage, because that might have some, you know, other people have touched it, it might be dirty, and so you just get rid of the outside leaves. And I've peeled off a couple of the bigger leaves here.
Yeah.
And we save those because at the end, after the cabbage is layered, we're going to put them on top, and that's what that's going to do, is it's going to stop the little shredded cabbage from floating up to the surface.
Okay.
So when you're cutting cabbage, you saw I just sort of cut it in half like that.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm going to do here is cut it in half again, and then just take out the core. Okay.
So why do you take out the core like that?
Because the core is going to keep it all together, and I don't want to have really big pieces of cabbage. I just want little slices. And then all I'm going to do is slice it against the grain, nice and thin like that.
How important is a sharp knife to you, Carl?
Well, you know, in this preparation, a sharp knife is crucial, because I'd like to go I'd like to go fast. If the knife wasn't sharp, it'd be a lot more dangerous because it would slip off the cabbage and maybe into my finger. But it allows me to go quick like this. Now in the kitchen, if you don't have a sharp knife, you're in a lot of trouble, you know. And the nice part about this Wüsthof too is that it keeps its edge for a long time. It's a good quality steel.
So, Chef, how often do you sharpen your knife?
Well, you sharpen your knife whenever it's dull. You know, if you notice that it's not slicing properly or having a hard time getting through something, then you'll need to sharpen it. Now, the steel here is not for sharpening, it's just for honing, right?
Yes, yeah.
So that burr on the end of this steel, on the end of the blade, the steel is going to realign that. When that's not doing anything, it means you do need to sharpen. And then, you know, this is a good stone. I don't know where you got this one, probably Lee Valley, right?
That is a Wüsthof stone, actually.
It's a Wüsthof stone. Oh, there you go. So it's got a 1000, 3000, which means that it's got a coarser grit and a finer grit. You know, for a knife like this, you probably never need to go more than a 1000. And, oh, it's already much sharper there.
You really notice the difference just like that, right?
But, you know, when the steel's not doing anything, it's time to take it to a stone.
Right.
I'm only going to do the one head here because this is already a lot of cabbage.
That's a lot of cabbage, yeah.
So, traditionally, we would ferment in a big sort of urn like this. Now this is ceramic and it's enameled on the inside. Or it's got some sort of coating on the inside, glass coating on the inside.
Where does one find one of these guys?
Honestly, I bought this online.
Really?
Yeah.
Expensive or?
$50 I think I paid for it.
And that's lasting you a lifetime unless you
Well, it should last a lifetime. And so traditionally you would do your fermentation in these big, what they call crocks. Okay, and you would layer your vegetables in there and put a big sort of, I mean, my grandfather would have described it as a brick on top, and pour your brine in and let it go. And then, you know, in the winter this would live in your cellar somewhere where it's, you know, cold, below 15 degrees, and the vegetables can stay like that indefinitely. Like, the whole purpose of this is that it's preserving it, right? They don't go bad. This is a little big and a little heavy for our purposes today, so we're going to use, Jamie, your little stainless steel pot. Now, if you're going to use steel, it has to be stainless. You can't use aluminum or Teflon or anything like that.
What about cast iron?
No, it's too porous.
Right.
And so you want this crock with the glass coating is perfect. You can use plastic. I use plastic all the time and it works fine. It's not the best. Stainless steel if you are going to go with metal. And step one is that you have to sanitize the utensils that you're going to use. So I've sanitized this, and I've sanitized a little flour plate that I found in your cupboard.
We call that our happy plate.
Your happy plate. Thank you. So cabbage, I'm going to take it, throw it in your little dish, and throw some juniper berries. Now this is very Alsatian, the juniper, and you can put onion in here, you can put apples in here, you can put nothing but cabbage in here. I like when there's a little sort of spice or flavor, so caraway or juniper would be the sort of traditional
classic ones, yeah. What else could you put in there just to mix it up a little bit?
People do turnip. If you go to Roncesvalles, you know, I've seen sauerkraut in buckets there with some cabbage in it. I guess some sort of Polish preparations would have, sorry, not cabbage, carrots.
Okay.
Be some carrots sliced up and in there, but it doesn't really matter. It's all going to get fermented. And so I don't put any juniper on the very top layer, just the cabbage on the top, and then we're going to add our whole leaves. And again, this is what's going to stop these thinly sliced cabbage from floating to the surface. Okay, so that's your layer on top. And then when it's done fermenting, these cabbage leaves is what you would use to make cabbage rolls.
Right, yeah.
Right?
Oh yeah, even after the fermentation you can use those for the cabbage rolls.
That's right. And then, you know, when my mother made cabbage rolls, she would layer sauerkraut in the cabbage rolls. So cabbage rolls, but she just used blanched cabbage. And then, you know, some sort of sausage like kielbasa, and then sauerkraut, and then a layer of cabbage rolls again.
Right.
But, you know, instead of adding sauerkraut into your casserole dish, you can just use the sour cabbage.
Gotcha.
To wrap them up. Okay, so that's it. So we've got our container, our plate on top, and you'll notice that there's a good amount of space on top here. Now I don't want to go too far too close to the top of the container,
Yeah,
because it's going to bubble, because it's going to create carbon dioxide, right? So anytime you have fermentation, there's going to be some sort of byproducts there. One is heat, right? Another one is carbon dioxide. Another one is alcohol to a certain extent. And another one is lactic acid. So it's the same thing when you're making beer, when you're making wine, when you're making sourdough, when you're making salami. And different yeasts or strains of bacteria will produce certain amounts and different amounts of those four things. We're gonna use the natural bacteria that's already on the cabbage. We're not going to use anything but salt water. And the bacteria that's going to flourish here is one that produces a high amount of lactic acid.
Okay.
Which is going to drop the pH to a point where bad bacteria, for best terms here, cannot survive.
All right. And once I mean, how long do you leave this to ferment?
Until it's acidic.
Right. So traditionally that would be over the course of the winter. Right?
Well, it depends on the environment and the temperature, but it should take anywhere from 1 to 2 weeks, because we're using a brine. If you're going to use the straight salt method, sometimes 3 weeks to 4 weeks. But it also depends on the temperature and the environment which you're fermenting in. So if it's warmer, it'll ferment a lot faster. If it's cooler, it'll ferment a lot slower. So your temperature should be around 16 to 20 degrees Celsius. And that, when you're using the brine technique here, should take anywhere from 1 to 2 weeks. And for us at the restaurant, we use a pH meter to test what the pH is going to be. And I usually go to around 3 to 3.2. And I like it on the more sour side.
So you're looking for a lower pH. Right?
Lower pH, yeah. So the lower the pH, the higher the acidity. But if you didn't have a pH meter, you would just...
I don't have one hanging about.
You would just dip a spoon in there, taste the brine, and if it's very acidic, then you're good. Okay. So the salt is really important here. You want to use something as unrefined as possible, and never, never, ever iodized table salt. You want to use kosher salts like this is, or sea salts, something that is not going to add more chemicals to what you're doing here. And then just add it to your water that's already been boiled.
And what's the concentration of the salt to water there?
Good question. You want to go anywhere from 2.75 to 3.25% salt, depending on what you're making. I usually just go straight in the middle and say 3%. So this is 2 liters, which is 2 kilos of water, and 60 grams of salt.
Right, okay, that makes sense.
And that seems to be the right amount for me. The salt is going to prohibit bad bacteria growth as well here. Salt is the main the key ingredient in the brine. Okay, so the brine's going to get poured over.
You leave a little bit of space at the top there, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
So we're going to go until the plate is submerged.
Huh.
Perfect. And then what I'm going to do is I've got just a jar of water, and I'm going to put that on top and just press it down.
Just to get all of those air pockets out.
Just
right?
get all the air out of it. That's right. And then that's good. So from here on, every day you're going to press that down and release the CO2. And then if you do have any sort of mold or growth on the top, you can just skim that off.
Okay.
What I like to do sometimes as well is just cover it with a towel, like that, and you can even take a string or an elastic band.
And that just stops anything from the ambient environment from getting in there, right?
That's right.
Okay.
Mainly flies.
Or children.
Yeah, or children. So that's it. So this is going to sit on a shelf somewhere cool, dark, hopefully 16 to 20 degrees Celsius. Every other day, come by and press the plate down.
Oh, so you don't need to take that off. You just press down.
Just press it down,
right,
and then give a peek if you need to skim it or whatever. And then after about a week, 7 days, dip a spoon in there, taste it. How does it taste? Is it acidic? If not, let it keep going.
Well, Carl Heinrich from Richmond Station, thank you very much for joining us today at Good Food Revolution and showing us how to use a Wüsthof chef's knife to cut up some cabbage and make some sauerkraut. Thank you.